I've been really grappling with this idea lately, just how dramatically education is changing. Like right before our eyes, it feels like it's not just about new teaching methods or updated textbooks anymore. There are these massive, almost unseen forces at play,
Yeah.
reaching far beyond the classroom walls. So today, our deep dive is all about how two huge overarching trends, globalization and digital technology, are profoundly reshaping the very foundations of the education system. And honestly, the more I looked at the sources you share, the more I realized just how intertwined and complex this really is.
Exactly. And our mission today really is to dig into those sources and pull out the most important nuggets, the insights that truly stand out. We're going to explore precisely how these trends influence the fundamental purposes of education, how it's delivered, and critically, the outcomes. We'll look at the opportunities, definitely, but also the challenges, and focus particularly on how they relate to either perpetuating or hopefully reducing educational inequalities.
Absolutely. So think of this deep dive as maybe your shortcut to truly understanding this rapidly evolving landscape. We've synthesized articles, some cutting-edge research, and our own notes to try and give you the clearest picture. Let's start by maybe getting a handle on these two powerful forces. First up, globalization. We hear this term a lot, right? But in education, it's really about the increasing interconnectedness of countries worldwide. Greater flows of people, capital, goods, services, ideas, all of it. When you think about that, how might this huge global flow impact something as seemingly local as, say, your neighborhood school? It's not just what happens inside the classroom anymore, is it?
No, it's far from just local.
Okay.
And then the second force is digital technology. This basically covers everything from the internet and computers to advanced software, digital communication tools, all used in education. What's truly striking here isn't just its presence, but its omnipresence. It's not just in the computer lab anymore. It's woven into almost every aspect of our daily lives, constantly redefining what's possible in learning.
Okay. So with those foundational ideas in mind, let's unpack globalization's far-reaching impact on education. One of the most visible things, I think, is international comparisons and policy borrowing. We're talking about those well-known PISA tables program for international student assessment, comparing 15-year-olds in maths, reading, science across different countries. What's often overlooked, though, is how much these rankings, maybe designed just for comparison, actually end up heavily influencing national policy decisions. You see governments like here in the UK constantly looking at Finland or, East Asian countries for inspiration. But is it really as simple as just borrowing a policy from one place and expecting it to work somewhere else?
That's a crucial question. And that's where this idea of policy borrowing gets really nuanced. Governments do frequently adopt reforms from other countries, maybe putting more emphasis on core subjects or bringing in new testing regimes. But the challenge is always how adaptable these models really are to different cultural contexts, different socioeconomic landscapes. It's less a direct copy-paste, more like a global marketplace of ideas where adaptation is key, but often the tricky bits of implementation get kind of glossed over.
Right. And it goes beyond just ideas, doesn't it? We're also seeing the actual globalization of educational services. This is about the rise of transnational corporations, TNCs like Pearson, the company that owns Edexcel. These companies now operate on a truly global scale. They provide a whole range of educational services, publishing textbooks, developing curricula, even designing entire assessment systems worldwide.
Yeah, and the real nugget here is realizing how deeply commercial interests, which were once pretty separate from public education, are now fundamentally shaping the fabric of learning across continents. This can lead towards, a significant standardization of educational content, often driven by profit motives. And that carries a risk of a sort of cultural homogenization in what gets taught and how it's assessed. It's a subtle shift, maybe, but a powerful one from public good towards global commodity.
Globalization also has a very direct, very human impact on our schools through migration and diversity. The increased global movement of people has led to much greater ethnic and cultural diversity in classrooms. Now, on one hand, this presents very real challenges, like providing crucial support for English as an additional language EAL support. But on the other hand, it creates these incredible opportunities for rich cultural exchange, broader perspectives, things that can benefit every single student.
Definitely. And in response to that diversity, we see various curriculum responses, things like promoting multicultural education or implementing anti-racist education, though, their effectiveness can vary quite a bit. And something else to consider is the often unseen pressures on children in transnational families, maybe where parents are working abroad. This can lead to disrupted education, even if digital communication helps maintain some family ties. Imagine the challenge of trying to learn when your main support system is thousands of miles away.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Finally, under globalization, we see its influence through the lens of global skills and competition. Education systems are increasingly focusing on developing what people are calling global skills. Things like critical thinking, digital literacy, adaptability, cross-cultural understanding. The goal, obviously, is to prepare students for a truly globalized job market. But that inevitably also means increased competition for university places, for jobs worldwide. It's almost like the whole world is now in the same classroom, competing for the same limited spots. Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about digital technology. It's undeniably transforming learning, but in doing so, it's raising some absolutely fundamental questions, especially around equity. Think about just the basic access to information and learning. Students now have this unprecedented access to vast online resources, research materials, online learning platforms like Moodle or Google Classroom. And then you've got MOOC's massive open online courses, which in theory could democratize higher education by offering free or cheap university level content to anyone, anywhere. It's like an ocean of knowledge at our fingertips, really.
And this ocean allows for something potentially revolutionary: personalized learning. What's fascinating here is how AI and adaptive learning software can genuinely tailor content and pacing to meet individual student needs. This level of customization, this almost individualized learning journey, was pretty much unimaginable before. It's like potentially having a private tutor for every student, constantly adjusting.
That incredible potential also leads to big changes in pedagogy, teaching methods. We're seeing
Right.
concepts like blended learning, mixing face-to-face with online stuff, and flipped classrooms where students get the core content at home online and then use that precious class time for problem solving, discussions, hands-on activities. Plus, there's this whole suite of interactive tools, smart whiteboards, educational apps, simulations that are fundamentally changing how students engage with the material. So, okay. We've outlined these two powerful transformative forces: globalization, digital tech. But here's the burning question that kept popping up in all our sources, the central debate, really. So what does this all actually mean for inequality? Does this new landscape truly equalize opportunity, make things more accessible, fairer? Or does it, maybe counterintuitively, just create new divides? Or worse, make the existing gaps even wider? It's a critical and often uncomfortable question.
Well, the sources present a very strong argument that digital technology primarily leads to greater inequality. And this is largely through what's known as the digital divide and existing material deprivation. The evidence is pretty stark.
Yeah.
Working class and materially deprived families are just significantly less likely to have reliable internet or up-to-date devices or even a quiet place to study at home. I mean, we all saw it during the COVID-19 pandemic, didn't we? Those stories of families trying to share one old smartphone between 3 kids for online lessons. It wasn't just about logging on. It was a real struggle for basic participation.
It really was, and that struggle highlights this huge, often unseen barrier. This lack of access stops disadvantaged pupils from fully engaging, from developing crucial digital literacy and, well, just keeping pace. And like you said, it's not just the physical stuff, the laptops and broadband, it's also about differences in digital literacy itself and parental support. Middle-class parents are often just better placed to help navigate online learning.
Exactly. And if we stick with the inequality argument for a moment, let's look back at globalization, marketization, and competition. The sources point out how those PISA rankings and the whole policy borrowing trend can actually drive a focus onto narrow, measurable targets. Sometimes this leads to what critics call teaching to the test, and that can inadvertently disadvantage students whose learning styles or broader knowledge isn't captured by these specific metrics. Then there's the commercialization bit, those global education businesses like Pearson we mentioned. They profit from standardized tests and materials, and this profit motive can, surprisingly perhaps, end up diverting resources away from equity initiatives because the focus shifts to globally marketable products.
This sounds a lot like what Stephen Ball, the sociologist, talked about with marketization policies, that idea of cream skimming and silt shifting. Can you unpack that for us?
Absolutely. Ball argued that these market forces, often influenced by global neoliberal ideas, lead schools to effectively cream skim. That means actively seeking out and enrolling the academically strong students to boost their own league table positions, makes them look good. And silt shifting is sort of the flip side, subtly discouraging or maneuvering out those students who might, for various reasons, lower their overall performance data. Students needing more support.
Wow. So schools are basically curating their intake.
In effect, yes, often at the expense of those who need the most support. And this, coupled with those global influences, creates a really fragmented system where middle-class parents are just far better equipped to navigate this competitive global market for education. They can make choices for their children that lower-income families simply can't. Now, while some argue positive policy borrowing can raise standards for everyone and increased diversity can enrich learning, the overwhelming picture from our sources is one where existing inequalities are often made worse.
It does paint a pretty stark picture. However, we also need to look at the counterargument, technology as an equalizer, because the sources do provide evidence for that too. Think about that increased access to information we mentioned. Online resources, MOOCs, they genuinely can make high-quality content accessible globally, regardless of your background or where you live. Personalized learning using adaptive software could truly help struggling learners by tailoring things to their specific needs and pace. And there's the sheer flexibility online learning offers for non-traditional students, adults returning to education, people with disabilities, those in remote areas who might otherwise just be excluded. It really can break down geographical, financial, physical barriers. It allows for self-paced learning, access to knowledge that was previously unavailable. But, and it's a big but, this raises that important question, can this potential truly be realized without tackling the persistent digital divide? And what about the ongoing debates around the quality, the accreditation of online learning versus traditional methods? The potential is there, undeniably, but the reality often seems limited by these external factors.
Yeah, absolutely. And to really get a handle on this complex tension, it's useful to look at how different sociological perspectives view this whole problem. Functionalism, for instance, would largely see globalization and digital tech as positive developments. From their viewpoint, these things promote global communication, shared knowledge. They prepare a globally interconnected workforce, ultimately contributing to social stability and economic progress. It's all about efficiency and advancement for the greater good, sort of.
Okay, so a very optimistic view then. But how would a Marxist perspective see it? They're typically more critical of power structures, aren't they?
In stark contrast, yes, Marxism would be far more critical. They'd likely view digital technology primarily as a tool for capitalist expansion and control. What's often highlighted is how the digital divide clearly exacerbates class inequalities by restricting access for the working class. There's also deep concern about the profit motive, these global education businesses making money from what should be a public good, and even new forms of surveillance over students and teachers through digital platforms.
That's a powerful counterpoint. What about feminism? Is it a clear-cut good or bad for them, or more complex?
For feminism, it's often seen as a double-edged sword. On one hand, you've got opportunities like remote learning offering crucial flexibility, maybe from mothers returning to education or balancing work and family. That could be empowering for some women. Yet, on the other hand, the digital divide can disproportionately affect women and girls in certain contexts. And there are valid concerns about new forms of online harassment and also the reproduction of gender stereotypes within the tech industries themselves.
Fascinating how each lens offers such a different take. What about the new right? They often emphasize individual choice in markets, so I imagine they'd be quite supportive.
Precisely. The new right would generally be supportive of technology, seeing it as a tool for efficiency and marketization. They'd likely argue for greater access, mainly if it enhances individual choice and competition within the education system. And finally, you have postmodernism. They tend to highlight the increased choice and the individualization of learning pathways that technology offers. For them, it leads to a more fragmented, more diverse educational experience, where learners can potentially tailor their own curriculum much more. So, to kind of synthesize the core argument that emerged from all our sources, while globalization and digital technology certainly offer significant potential for educational advancement, and they can provide some equalizing benefits like that, access to information, flexible learning, the sociological evidence we looked at largely suggests that, in practice, they have primarily exacerbated existing inequalities.
It really is a complex and deeply nuanced picture, isn't it? And this seems to be largely due to very real factors like that persistent digital divide we talked about, the pervasive impact of marketization, which is itself influenced by these global trends, and the increasing commercialization of what many believe should really remain a public good, education.
Yes. Our conclusion, really, based on the material we reviewed, is that without significant targeted social policies, policies specifically designed to address those underlying material and cultural inequalities, these powerful trends are likely to just keep reinforcing existing disparities rather than fundamentally challenging them. The benefits, sadly, seem to accrue disproportionately to those who are already privileged. It widens the very gaps we hope education might close.
It truly makes you wonder, doesn't it? In a world that's increasingly shaped by these forces, what specific targeted interventions could actually level the playing field in education for all learners? Not just reinforce the existing setup, what might a truly equitable, global, and tech-integrated education system actually look like for you? Something to think about.